be here. We have a lot of ground to cover. This is what we'll be doing. A definition, 5 reputations, 3 key findings, 12 lessons, 2 incredible stories, and 1 invitation. So fasten your seatbelts. We are going to learn how to make the whole organization agile. And when you go to conferences about Agile and Scrum, not this one, but many of them, you hear a lot of happy talk and selling about what might be happening in Agile, what could be happening, and what should happen if you hire me as a consultant. We last year, Scrum Alliance launched a Learning Consortium of organizations that wanted to learn what's actually happening. Not what might be happening, what could be happening, it's what is actually happening. And we formed a consortium of these groups. And the goal was to get beyond PR and fake Agile. And so we also took account of the fact when you go to general management conferences, you have the opposite kind of talk. You have that Agile and Scrum basically bullshit. It's only for software, it doesn't scale, it can't handle complexity, isn't reliable, and it doesn't last. So not a very serious thing. So we wanted to check out those things. Is that true? Are any of those things true? And so we put together this group of folks. We asked anyone in the world, any firm that wanted to learn about this, and happily, a number of very famous firms, big firms and small firms, joined to share with us what they were actually doing. Not what they could be doing, but what they are actually doing, and to learn from each other what is actually working and what isn't. And we're going to be, in fact, we did complete that last year. We had 9 site visits. We had a retrospective. We produced a report, which you can download here. And we also had a lot of conversations and mutual learning. And in some ways, they were the most important part of this whole activity. The conversations about what we saw and what it meant and what it was, the implications for their own organizations. These were the richest part of the whole event. But you can, in fact, have this comprehensive report of what we learned. And we're doing it again this year. And in addition to some of the firms we looked at last year, Spotify and Barclays and BMW will be sharing their experiences and seeing how this is actually playing out, what could be happening, but what is actually happening. And we looked, as I say, at these things that you hear in general management conferences, and we found out that none of those things were true. That, in fact, Agile is spreading to everything. It handles complexity. It scales without sclerosis. It can be fail-safe. Some of these organizations have been doing this for 10 or 15 years with fail-safe things, handling medical devices with life and death. This is something that is durable. It lasts if you do it right. These general perceptions in the management community at large are simply not true. And the most surprising findings that we had were these 3, that this is a mindset that involves strong leadership, and it is something is actually happening. Some of these big old dinosaurs, you think they'll never change. In fact, some of them, not all of them, in fact, not many of them, but some of them are changing in a very dramatic fashion. I'll be telling you about some of those changes. And the most important finding is this, that Agile is a mindset. It's a certain way of looking at the world, understanding the world, and acting in the world as a result of having that view of the world. It's not something that you can write down and put in an operational manual, or you can put aspects of it, but you cannot capture this mindset in an operational manual. It's a different way of understanding and acting in the world. Why did Agile emerge in this way? Well, there are good reasons. In fact, management in the 20th century, bureaucratic, hierarchical, was a huge success, one of the great successes of the human race. So why does it have to change? Why is Agile emerging as an alternative to hierarchical bureaucracy? Well, in fact, the world changed. These 4 factors, globalization, deregulation, knowledge work, and the internet in particular, meant that the world was a different place. The marketplace was very different. Greater competition, faster pace, digitalization of everything, and the customer is the boss. And when you look at articles in Harvard Business Review, they mainly focus on these top 3 factors: greater competition, faster pace, and digitalization. But in fact, the most important thing, I believe, and is the basis of Agile and its emergence, is that the customer
is now the boss. The customer is in charge of the marketplace, a radical shift in power in the marketplace. So it means that everything that organizations are going to be doing are going to have to change radically. So it's a mindset. It's not a technology, a process, a methodology, a system, a platform, and big data. It's not an organizational structure. This is a mindset. And what we saw in the Learning Consortium is that when you have this mindset, the benefit flow would hardly matter which particular process you're using, because the mindset made it right. It made it come out right. But if you didn't have that mindset, it didn't matter how many processes you had, how accurately you implemented the Scrum Guide, no benefits flowed. This is the key factor in order to get benefit from this. And so a lot of the organizations that say they are implementing Agile, in fact, when you look at it, they're not getting benefits because they don't have the mindset. And because we're living at a historic moment, Harvard Business Review, after 20 years of struggle, has finally published an article about something that's transforming the world of management. It was a huge battle. It took at least a year, took 20 years to get this article published. The last year was a brutal battle with the three authors to get Harvard Business Review to publish this article. And in many ways, it's a wonderful article. It has a lot of wonderful things about the Agile Manifesto and the processes and Scrum and Kanban and Lean and all of those things. And it says now Agile methodologies are a radical alternative to command and control management. Now, the back of that sentence is correct, but the front is not. As I've said in an article in Forbes, that is wrong. It's the mindset which is a radical alternative. This is a different framework, a different kind of management. It's not a methodology for implementing existing management. It's a different kind of management. So you can read that article. And I checked with one of the authors, Jeff Sutherland, who is in fact father of Scrum and co-father of Scrum, co-father of the Agile Manifesto. Before I published the article, I said, well, what do you think about this article? Should I attack your article? Because the article is a wonderful step forward. And he said, right, go ahead. It's exactly right. This article is, this was a compromise. We've been struggling to get this damned article published, and in order to get it published, we went along with these compromises. But in fact, what you're saying is correct. Many parts of the article are talking about just doing Agile, and real Agile is about being Agile. And this, according to the Harvard Business Review editors, was as far as they could go with what they call Agile in name only companies, what I call fake Agile companies, as compared to what Agile really is. But it's a wonderful article, and recommend that you read it in addition to my article. And it has some interesting things in it. One is a finding that comes from our work in Scrum Alliance, which is surveys that show that 70%, more than 70%, often 90%, of teams report tension between the way a Scrum team is operating and the way the whole organization is operating. Why is that? Well, it's pretty simple, because you have in Agile and Scrum, when it's done properly, they are responding to the Agile Manifesto dictate that the highest priority, the very highest priority in the organization is to deliver value to the customer, delight the customer. By contrast, in business, according to The Economist this month, they had a big article saying the most important thing in business is not that. The most important thing, the most highest priority, is to deliver value to the shareholders, including the C-suite, who are often big shareholders. That is a very different dynamic. And this article, interesting, it says shareholder value rules business. This is the biggest idea in business. So these are two radically opposed ideas. So you have a team giving value to focus intensely on giving value to customers, delighting customers, and you have the whole organization seeing how to extract value and give that to the shareholders. So you can understand why most Agile Scrum teams see a tension between what they're doing and what the organization is doing. There's also a statement here. I mean, Harvard Business Review has published many silly statements in its long life. This is one of the silliest. It says, number of companies have reallocated 25% of the leader's time to agile leadership teams. Now this is like saying, we are going to be good 25% of the time. Oh, what about the other 75%? So of course if you have 25% of your time working on the teams, and you've got 75% extracting value for the customers, guess what happens? The 75% crushes the 25%. So this is really one of the silliest things they've ever said. It's a statement about doing Agile. This is why doing Agile doesn't work. You have to be Agile. You have to say, we are now going to be a different kind of organization with different values, different goals, different way of running the organization. And when you look at this picture of an organization, a pyramid of boxes, I mean, if I ask you to draw a picture of an organization, you might well draw this picture, but the big thing that's wrong with this picture, many things, but one thing that's wrong is the most important thing, the customer, is not there. The most important thing of the organization is not part of the picture we have of organizations. So we need to have a new picture of what an organization looks like. It's an interactive picture in which the management and the people doing the work and the people for whom the work is being done are continuously interacting to improve those three relationships. A very, very different mindset of what an organization looks like. And this is what principal finding in our report, Agile, Scrum, it's a mindset. And most important is this change in the goal from extracting value for the shareholders to delivering value to customers, delighting the customers. A fundamental shift, but not a new idea. Peter Drucker talked about this in 1954, but here we are in 2016 still struggling to implement this fundamental idea. And when you have this different goal, it leads to all of the things we'll be talking about in this conference, different structure of work, sprints, time boxing, story points, all of those things, coordinating work, different values, different way of communicating. They are hugely important to get right, but they are not as important as getting the goal right. Unless you get the goal right, none of those processes and systems and methodologies will actually lead to benefit. So one illustration of this, how many layers can you have in a medium big organization and still be agile? Anyone got any idea? What's the maximum number of layers? 2, 3? Any advance on 3? 5, 7? Anyone think you can be agile with 7? The answer is it doesn't matter. When you go into a tiny little organization with only one layer, and it's not at all agile. But you can go into a big organization, some of those huge organizations we went to, where they had 7, even more layers, but it didn't matter because there was the CEO, the CIO, sitting on the same 2x6 movable desk as everyone else, the most junior staff member of the organization, working in a workspace that was exactly like the most junior member of the organization, and you could by accident stroll into his or her office, and what we saw are conversations happening across and down and up those layers. The layers didn't matter because everyone had this mindset. Everyone was totally focused on delivering value to customer, and so it didn't matter whether you're a CEO or a junior staff member, whoever had the best idea, that was the person you wanted to talk to solve the problem. So it doesn't matter how many layers you have once you have the right mindset. And so this is, as Donald Trump would say, a huge change. This is not a little change. This is huge. I mean, how big is it? I mean, I make this analogy to astronomy. I mean, we had this huge transformation of thinking about astronomy. We thought the sun revolved around the Earth. Eventually figured out, no. It's the Earth that revolves around the sun. It's a bit the same in management, that we thought, and it was true to some extent in the 20th century, that the firm was the center of the universe and the customer was something out there on the periphery. What we've discovered in the 21st century is exactly the opposite. The customer is the center of the universe and the firms are on the periphery trying to figure out how they can delight this mercurial creature, the customer, and actually generate value for themselves in the process. So this shift in goal is absolutely fundamental. You hear at many Agile conferences, not this one of course, that some of the speakers just assume that this is still the case, that the purpose of a firm is to make money, and a lot of lean thinking assumes this, and Of course, in many of the fake Agile organizations, this is in fact what everyone knows, that the purpose is still to make money, and Scrum and Agile is just some big thing on the periphery. We are talking about genuine Agile, genuine Scrum, delighting the customer as the center of everyone in the organization, having a clear line of sight how they are adding value to customers and how they can deliver more value to customers. Fundamental shift. That's the first lesson. Agile is a mindset. Second lesson we've got is that this requires leadership. What we saw in all these organizations is strong leadership at all levels of the organization, at the team level, at the middle level, at the upper level, people who are obsessed with this vision of creating more value to the customer. You see articles written about holacracy, about getting rid of bosses. That is bullshit. Frankly, this is not about that at all. This is different kind of leadership, strong leadership at the top and at the middle and at the lower levels, all working together with this common goal. And leaders, they have to believe, because they are fighting this, thinking what the economists call the biggest idea in business. You have to keep fighting, and you have to believe if you're going to succeed against that kind of opposition. And the third big finding was that these big old dinosaurs have been able to change. Some people say it's not possible, just let them die. Well, some of them have actually made the change. But the reason they're doing it is not because they love Scrum or Agile or what they want to have, they like this kind of doing. They have no choice. They are being driven out of business. And you look at what drove Microsoft's decision. They saw back in a couple of years ago that unless they got into this new mold, they would not survive. And so it was life or death decision for them. And Microsoft's story is a pretty interesting one. And I've written about it at length on my Forbes site, so you can see some of the highlights. The following, that when they decided to join the Learning Consortium, I had very low expectations because I visited Microsoft about 10 years ago, and it was like this. It was like the biggest hierarchical bureaucracy you could ever work in. Impossible to get anything done in this organization. So I said, well, here we go, another fake Agile organization. But when we got there, it actually looked like this. It was like a flotilla of speedboats, which were coordinated and operating and interacting. Fundamentally different change had come over Microsoft in the part of Microsoft that we were visiting. We were visiting the Visual Studio Group, which is part of the developer division. So the Visual Studio Group is, it's about 25 teams, and the developer division, that's 400 teams, 4,000 people. So it's actually a pretty sizable group. And the new head of Microsoft, Satya, actually comes out of the developer division. So this is Microsoft. And our host in this visit was Aaron Bjork, who will appear in a video I'll show you in just a second. He showed us around about how this change had actually operated in Microsoft over a period of years.
Today, a market opportunity comes and goes very, very quickly. We buy software with the touch of a finger on our phones, on our mobile devices, from our computers, and we do that every day. When I look back to software 10 years ago, you could spend a year planning, spend a year coding, and then spend a year delivering.
Those days are gone, okay? Today the world is, hey, I've got an idea. I want to think about how fast I can translate that idea into reality and get it to my customer's hands, then understand what my customer's experience is, what my customer is doing with that, and take that knowledge and learning and make my application or my service better.
And there's a new market demand, and there's a new competitor, and there's new business, and there's new opportunity, and we have to go take advantage of those things. And so, as a business, if you don't adapt to that, you're just going to die a slow, painful, ugly death.
It's a huge shift, and it's a huge shift for everybody.
What you really want to do is think about providing the level of agility that each team needs to have to be able to do what they need to do, but also know that they all are going to accrue value to one service or one application at the end of the day.
It's about how you manage change. Changing the culture for a small team of 10 or 15 or even 20, 30 people is one thing. Changing the culture for 500, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 people is a much bigger deal.
Our organizations and companies that can adapt very quickly to changes in the business landscape, in the customer landscape, the technology landscape, are always going to be in a position to immediately adjust and deliver something new. And the company who's on a long-range 2- and 3-year plan will have missed it.
It's change or die. That is the dynamic that's driving a big old dinosaur like Microsoft to make this fundamental change. And when you go and visit these workplaces, unlike any workplace I ever worked in when I worked in the World Bank, I mean, they're like nightclubs. It really is. When you walk in, you think, well, yeah, this feels like fun, just walking in the door. So there's a very different atmosphere right from the moment when you step inside those offices. So how did this thing on the left become the thing on the right? What was actually driving this change? How did it happen? How did that transformation happen? Well, it happened in the following sequence. In 2008, Aaron was finding problems in his work and heard about Agile and Scrum and said, let's give it a try in my team. 2009, he persuaded a couple of teams, hey, this seems to be working, let's give it a try. 2010, Brian Harry, the corporate vice president, agreed to make an official experiment in the Visual Studio Group 25 team. They were going to try out Agile. Huge success. 2011, he said, okay, now the whole developer division, 4,000 people, we are all going to become Agile. At the time, Ken Schwaber, one of the fathers of Scrum, said this will never work, can't possibly work in a big organization like Microsoft, but we actually went there and found out it is working, it is genuine. We talked to the staff, we talked to the middle managers, we talked to anyone we could find, and as far as we could see, this is actually happening. And in 2014, they made a decision that they are going to become wholly Agile across the whole organization. And 2015, the developer division got a mandate to carry out this across the organization, and of course, Satya is now the head of the CEO of Microsoft as a whole. So this is now an organization in transition. And of course, there are some parts of Microsoft which are not like this, and there are still many battles to be fought, and we're going back there in a couple of weeks to find out what they've done since last year and see how much progress they've made. So it's a journey. It's not that they have perfect or have done everything, but they have made huge, huge changes since 2004. And this is 12 lessons that we saw in the site visits. I mean, Microsoft is a kind of quintessential example, but many of the same things we saw in the other organizations. So let me run through the 12 lessons. Number one, acquiring this mindset can take time. I mean, some people get it immediately, but some managers, we ran into one manager who had been at it and just couldn't seem to get it. I mean, super smart guy, had worked in software, worked in sales, done huge experience, educated, everything, but somehow or other he couldn't seem to get it. And he'd been put in charge of this huge unit in a big organization like Microsoft, and he had a coach, and he would look at what needed to be done, and he would tell the coach, suppose I did this. And the coach would say, well, you could do that, but that would make things really bad. And then went on a bit and then said, well, suppose I did that. And the coach said, well, you could do that, but that would make things even worse. So he, that went on for about 6-9 months, and then eventually he said, I'm not getting this, because I know this works, I've seen it work, but I'm somehow not getting it. And he went on vacation, took a pile of books, my book, and spent the time reading the book, and suddenly you saw it, that this was about a different way of looking at the world. And so he wrote to the coach and said, well, suppose I did A, B, C, and D. And the coach said, well, now you've got it. Now you don't need me anymore. Now you have a mindset. You're starting to look at the world in a different way. So that took 9 months. Other cases, it might never happen. So this is not something we can expect that everyone will instantly get and implement it. And the second thing is that the second lesson is that the implementation takes time. If you look at that Microsoft schedule, I mean, that was 7 or 8 years just to make huge progress on a 4,000 person division. I mean, this is not something that happens overnight. If they had done all of the changes that they've made in day one, I mean, they would have had a revolution on their hands. They would never have worked. So they did it step by step. 1 team, 2 teams, 25 teams, 400 teams. I mean, they worked in a progressive way. The change in the organization came right at the end. The organizational structure, that was one of the last things. The change in the workspace, that came right at the end. They didn't impose those changes at the start. And what they found was that by waiting in that way, it was a very easy transition. People wanted to change the organizational space. I mean, they said, these walls are getting in the way. We can't have our coordination, can't have our collaboration. Why don't we have space that actually fits the way we work? So the management, okay, we'll change the workspace. So it can take time. Third lesson is firms are at different places on this journey. It's not you are either agile or not. This is a journey, and some are at the early stage of the journey, some are at medium level, and some are very advanced. And so it's not about being agile or not, it's about what is the next step in our journey? What is the next thing we do to become more agile? And all of the journeys involve huge setbacks, unlike some folks who hear at these conferences. All of these firms suffered devastating setbacks, often in the first year. The first year was often the most difficult, and they did things which, in retrospect, they think, how could I have been so dumb to do those things? But they did them, and it felt at the time as though the world had come to an end, as though they couldn't possibly recover from these mistakes. And they shared these mistakes with us, and we talk about them in the report. But anyone who tells you that this is a smooth road and that it's easy, this is not for the faint of heart. You need leadership and strength and courage to get through these setbacks as they occur, particularly in the early stages. And fifth lesson is we saw that all of these firms are adapting their practices to their own context. None of the firms implemented Scrum or Kanban or Lean exactly as you find in the guides. They were always adapting them to fit their thing. But the successful firms had embodied the heart and the essence of those practices. And as they adapted them, they didn't miss the spirit. They didn't miss the point of the practices. They adapted them in a way that made them better for that particular organization. But they were quite unlike those organizations that say, well, we need to become agile, but, well, we don't really like teams, so we won't have teams, and we don't really like sprints. That doesn't fit our work. And we don't really like getting it done at the end of a sprint. But we'll be agile. Those kinds of adjustments of which we didn't see. What we saw is firms that had implemented the essence of Scrum, the essence of Lean, the essence of Agile, but they had made little adaptations in terminology or exactly how it fitted to their particular needs in their organization. So we didn't see too many coaches and trainers hanging around these organizations. They were leaders from within the firm that believed intensely in Agile and Scrum and were leading the change from within the organization. Lesson number 6, these practices are both durable and fragile. Some organizations have been doing it for over 15 years, so this is not something that will fade away, but at the same time they're very fragile. We saw that you could destroy 10 years of progress with one manager. One manager coming in with a different mindset could destroy every step of progress in a matter of weeks. It's like chopping a tree down. It can take 100 years to grow the tree. 10 minutes, you've chopped it down, and the same thing could happen. So they are both fragile and durable. 7th lessons, the new management practices create a passionate workforce. Once the workforce has lived in true agile workspaces, no way are they going back to the other way. So if you introduce this in the organization and then you cut it down, you are going to lose those staff. They're going to go elsewhere. They will not stick around once they've experienced what it's like to work in these So we asked the organization, would you leave? Asked the staff when the managers were present, and they said, no way. This is just so much better. We're not going to be changing. We're not going to go for anything else. 8th lesson, this is actually happening. Future's already here. It's just very unevenly distributed. if you look around, you can find most organizations are at least pockets of this change happening. And as I saw in these organizations that joined us, most of them have quite large-scale Agile implementation. So this is not something that might happen, not something that could happen. This is something that is actually happening. And that's why, of course, Harvard Business Review has written an article about it. The pressure to admit that this is happening is there. That's why McKinsey has this huge agility hackathon underway right now. The world has realized this is something huge. We don't quite understand it sometimes, but the world in general is really, we need to come to terms and find out what this thing is happening. It is happening, and you can find out. And the best way to find out is go and visit and see what it looks like. A couple of things that it's not about. The ninth lesson was, this is not about becoming digital. And you read all these books and articles, become digital, have a platform, become a digital organization. This will solve your problems. It's not about that at all. I mean, Microsoft was digital back in 2004, and that didn't really help them. And what has changed is that they have a different mindset in using technology. So it's the mindset that gets the results. The digital technology without the mindset, no benefits at all. It's when you have this different mindset, that's when you start to get benefits from the digital technology. Now, of course, managers are hugely attracted to this because they think, well, if we have platforms and digital stuff, we won't have to change. We can just keep managing the way we've always managed. Great. Well, that isn't going to work. It's not going to get to the benefits. So you have to actually go through the change. Another area, I'm going to lose control. Terrible. It's going to be the end of the world. And my manager told me, it's like nausea and vertigo they felt when I first flew an airplane at night with zero visibility. One manager, it's like having a triple root canal operation. I'm not looking forward to this much enthusiasm because, I mean, this idea of bureaucracy is that you have total control. It's a sealed system, finite, linear, under management control. The only problem was that forgot that there's this thing called the customer out there who is not amenable to the control, and once the customer is central to the organization, this thing isn't going to work. So the good news of the Learning Consortium is, it doesn't mean giving up control. And let me explain what I mean here is when you look at what happened in hierarchical bureaucracy, and Microsoft gave us very vivid pictures of what happened when they were running with hierarchical bureaucracy, is that it was total lack of transparency. They had these reports going up and down the hierarchy, but they had no relation to what was actually happening on the ground in the workplace. And everyone was in a self-protective mode, and quality problems was someone else's fault, and so there were huge, huge problems. And so nothing was ever shipped on time. There was massive technical debt. They had a semblance of control. They didn't have actual control. So when you start to say, well, why don't we get actual control, that's when you have Agile, because you have total transparency. You finish work each iteration. You get feedback from customers directly at that point. You have information radiating all across the organization. You identify problems early, and you have little technical debt. You have actual control, not semblance of control. So this is not about giving up control. So if your manager says, I can't do Agile because I can't give up control, explain this side to the manager. This is about acquiring actual control. It's about giving up a semblance of control and getting actual control. And the way Aaron was describing it in Microsoft is the following, that it's a question of getting a balance between control and autonomy. And it's like the rules of the road. If you don't have enough rules, suppose you don't make a decision whether we drive on the left or the right, you're going to run into quite a bit of chaos on the road. So you need a certain minimum number of rules. If you don't have that minimum, then you're going to have chaos. But if you have too many rules, on the roads, if you have speed bumps every 50 meters and red lights every 25, you'll have a safer road system, but you won't be able to go anywhere. So that's too much control. So it's getting the balance between autonomy and control. And lesson number 11, you've got to get started. This is going to take you some time if you're an organization of some size. Microsoft, been at it 7 years, and they're still pushing ahead across the organization. So if you start today with genuine Agile, maybe by 2023 you'll be making good progress. And if you think of all the things that might go wrong between now and 2023, it's probably a good idea to get started now. You have no time to lose if you're not already on this journey. And the final lesson is you never arrive. It's not as though you get to a point and say, well, now we can relax. Now we're agile. Now we don't have to worry anymore. And an illustration of this is one of the members of the Learning Consortium, the Riot Games, which is a organization that was born agile. It was born by the founders who had intended to create an organization that was implementing Scrum and Agile from day one. And they have become a huge organization in a space of 10 years. And very agile. As fine an implementation as agile as I or any of the other members of the Learning Consortium have ever seen. And they have this, they do any gaming, they have this game called League of Legends, and it is a huge phenomenon. 67 million players a month, 27 million a day. Right now, about 8 million people playing this game. And it makes a huge amount of money. Not on the game itself, the game is free, but people get so passionate about this game, they want to buy extras related to the game. And the World Championship of League of Legends is a bigger event than the Super Bowl. It's a massive, massive, massive scores of millions of people watching this event. This whole thing has become a huge thing, and it's a worldwide organization. It has occupies about 10% of the world's internet traffic. Massive phenomenon, and it's driven by the audience and by the staff who are in this agile mode. They are passionate about the game. They are all gamers. They love the game. They want to make this game better, and they are continually improving it. They make movies. They produce music. They expanding into all sorts of different fields to make this the most player-focused organization in the world, the most customer-focused organization in the world. I think they would have a good chance at doing that. But they haven't arrived. It's not as though they say, well, now we can relax. We have this organization which is hugely agile, can change direction in a flash, enter new fields and dominate them. They are still fighting the battle to stay agile because there are continuing threats. People coming into the organization might bring bad ideas into the organization. You hire a new manager, and before you know it, suddenly bureaucracy is growing up in the organization. So there is no staying steady. They realize that they either have to become more agile or they will fall back. So you never arrive in this. This is a journey which never ends. So you think we're going to finish agile, think again, this is not going to happen. You're going to continue to be agile or you'll slide back. So this report, we tried to capture this as much as we can, and this comment, I think, captures the essence that this is not about shallow promises or hoopla or dancing on the surface. This is what is actually happening in Scrum and Agile around the world. And we're doing it again this year, and we hope to learn more. And we'll be sharing those findings as soon as we have them. And we also planning to do it next year. So if you're a medium or large company interested in joining this learning, then contact us. This creates a safe space. No competitors, no consultants, no consulting firms, no risk of this information leaking out, totally confidential. If you want publicity, like Microsoft wanted publicity, so they got it. It has a modest fee, and it's an independent organization which you can join and be part of this learning process. And the learning, one of the members, C.H. Robinson, learned more from this than any coaching or training, because you actually see what it's like, and it creates leadership confidence, because in carrying out these transformations, you are fighting a battle to move these entrenched bureaucracies. You must believe, you must have confidence in the fact that you've actually seen it. I saw it, I know it. don't tell me that this doesn't work. I know it does work. It's that kind of confidence that you can only get from actually having seen it. And the connections you get from the other people involved is a huge reassurance and learning that you actually have a network of people that you can relate to. And so if you're interested in this, particularly large, medium-sized organizations, contact me and we can talk about what it would be like. It's not really for individuals, and we'll share as much as we can in the report. You can see last year's report. And we have these monthly webinars, which we'll be sharing as much as we can in those about the results. And if you want to, they've been going on for the last year and a half, you can go back to see the recordings of those webinars too and learn what we learned in those. And we have some of the members of the Learning Consortium sharing their views. So this is something you might want to pursue. So we have covered one definition, 5 reputations, 3 key findings, 12 lessons, 2 incredible stories, and 1 invitation. And if you can't remember all of that, I've actually summarized it in a 1-minute video.
In the world of 2015, there are only 2 kinds of organizations: those that delight their customers and those that don't. In firms that delight their customers, managers are enablers of self-organizing teams and continuous innovation. In the other firms, managers are controllers of individuals doing more of the same. In firms that delight their customers, employees are fully engaged in creating great customer outcomes. In the other firms, work is a dreary grind to produce merely average outputs. The firms that delight their customers are hugely profitable, while the other firms struggle just to stay in place. Firms that delight their customers are putting the other firms out of business. We know why this is happening, and we know the radical management principles that drive it. Welcome to the future.
So that's my presentation.